Hello, and welcome to our first webinar of the year. I'm Maria Golden, a project manager at Dovetail Partners, and I'll be moderating today's session. We'll be discussing carbon capture and storage and exploring innovations in climate solutions. Dovetail Partners is hosting quarterly webinars to highlight key topics from our reports. To learn more about upcoming webinars and to register, simply scan the QR code on the screen. So a little bit about us. Dovetail Partners is a nonprofit organization that provides information about the impacts of environmental decisions. Today, we're joined by two speakers, Catherine Fernholz and Harry Groot. Catherine is the president of Dovetail Partners. She is a forester by training with over 25 years of experience in the forest and forest products sector. She has worked on environmental issues in a range of roles, including environmental assessments, permitting, and GIS analysis. Her career has focused on sustainability concerns, including leadership on family forestry, community-based decision-making, forest certification, and environmental standard setting. Harry Groot is our second speaker today. His projects over the last 6 years have focused on biochar, the biochar industry, and its technology and market potential. He is a Dovetail associate who has authored several Dovetail reports. Harry's work experience is built on his mechanical engineering undergraduate and industrial engineering graduate work. He has worked in forest products manufacturing since 1980, serving in both the public sector and private sector. He specialized in business analysis, planning, and consulting on technical, business, and organizational issues. We'll have a Q&A session at the end, so feel free to submit any questions into the chat as we go along. And from here, I'll hand it over to Katie to get us started.
Thank you, Maria, and excited to be here for our first webinar to kick this off for 2025. As Maria said, our topic is going to be exploring carbon capture and storage and really looking at innovations in climate solutions. So happy to be here with Harry this morning. I'm going to start us off. I'm going to cover the first two major bullets on this slide. Really, what is carbon dioxide removal and what is carbon capture storage? I'll talk about the two major categories, talk about some pros and cons, have a couple of graphics that help imagine what this might look like. And then Harry's going to take over and go into much more detail around natural carbon sequestration for climate mitigation and some of the very specific methodologies that relate to the forest and wood product sector. We're going to have a little bit, a brief amount of time here today to cover a lot of stuff. So if you're looking for more information, the details, the citations, the references, if you really want to dig into this topic a bit more, I invite you to go to the Dovetail Partners website. On the left on this slide, that is the major report that a lot of the information comes from that we're going to talk about this morning. That's available at our website. All of our reports are accessible for free at our website. That includes a lot of additional information around carbon capture technologies. On the right, you'll see from our reports library a number of biochar and natural climate solutions related reports that are also available. So if you want to dig into biochar details specifically, please go to the website and look for those materials. And the QR code in the middle of the screen will get you straight to our reports portfolio at the website. So what is carbon dioxide removal, CDR? I'm sure everybody was looking for yet another acronym in their lives. Well, my gift to you, CDR. So what is carbon dioxide removal? This is a very large umbrella term for any activity that results in taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So anything that results in carbon dioxide coming out of the atmosphere falls under this tent of carbon dioxide removal. It can be confusing because in some conversations, people will be talking about certain subsets, but in its general, most inclusive approach, carbon dioxide removal is any activity that results in taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. There are two big categories of carbon dioxide removal. One is natural climate solutions, things that happen in nature across the landscape. And the second category is engineered solutions, which may be mechanical or chemical. In the category of natural climate solutions, we're talking about things that relate to forests, wetlands, grasslands, ag, cropland, pasture land, all types of ag lands, and anything that either is just happening naturally or things that we can enhance through our management decisions to either reduce emissions or increase carbon storage. Harry's going to go into a lot more details around natural climate solutions, like I said, and the NCS, the natural climate solutions that relate to forest and wood products. But we can, you can use your imaginations of all the different ways we interact with the landscape to enhance carbon storage or reduce emissions. On the right-hand side there, you see this number, 24 gigatons of CO2 per year. That's the estimate of the carbon dioxide capturing benefit of the full suite of natural climate solutions. And just keep that number in the back of your head, 24 gigatons. You're going to see a few other numbers in terms of what the carbon capture potential is for these different technologies. And for, to understand the relationship between that 24 gigatons and emissions, it's a big round number, but one estimate of the total emissions that we need to offset through carbon capture technologies is about 50 gigatons per year. That's a big round number full of lots of assumptions. But in general, you can think of natural climate solutions as having the potential for offsetting at least a third, maybe half of our emissions in that ballpark. All of the climate scientists that just cringed because of my gross generalizations, my apologies, but just to give everybody a little sense of the scale. The second big category of carbon dioxide removal technologies are engineered solutions, mechanical and chemical methodologies. So the two big areas of development we hear about around engineered CDR or mechanical and chemical CDR is carbon capture and storage, CCS, and direct air capture, DAC. The difference between these two, in general, carbon capture and storage is going to happen at a point source where carbon dioxide is being emitted, like at a power plant, at a manufacturing facility, but a point source of carbon dioxide emissions is where the term carbon capture and storage is often used, or just carbon capture, because not every time is there this long-term storage kind of component happening at the same site. Direct air capture is different. It's where you're having ambient air, just capturing carbon dioxide out of ambient air, not at a point source for it, but in regular concentrations. So clearly capturing at a point source is going to be more efficient, higher concentrations. And the goal with carbon capture and storage is for that captured carbon dioxide to be stored underground and in long-term storage, taken out of the atmosphere. That captured carbon can be used in a variety of manufacturing operations. It can be a useful material. The primary place where we currently see carbon dioxide capture happening is oftentimes with power plants or also with biofuels production facilities, ethanol production facilities, carbon capture technologies. And the most frequent use, industrial use of captured carbon dioxide is for enhanced fossil fuel extraction. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but we do see this occurring in the landscape, and we do see the carbon dioxide being utilized. On the right-hand side, again, you'll see a number, 20 gigatons of carbon dioxide per year as the potential capacity for these technologies by the end of the century. So like we talked about, natural climate solutions already, because they're existing strategies capable of the 24 gigatons per year, these emerging technologies may reach 20 gigatons by the end of the century. Again, a lot of speculation around these numbers, but just to give you a sense of the scale. Here's a graphic of where some of these engineered solutions and some of these natural climate solutions might appear across the landscape, how we can think of these different systems being installed and operating, because certainly there's a lot of discussion about needing a diversity of strategies. It's not going to be one, it's going to be many different approaches. So from tree planting and forest expansion to things we do in the built environment, engineered solutions at industrial sites, storage underground, biochar production, enhancements within soils. You can imagine across the landscape these different strategies being installed. So let's talk a little bit more about carbon capture and storage. And this is a suite of different technologies, again, that primarily are going to be capturing carbon dioxide at a point source, at a power plant or some kind of manufacturing facility, industrial facility, something like that, where the carbon dioxide is captured. One of the major infrastructure needs around this technology is the capacity to transport that captured CO2 through pipelines or through systems such as that to transport that carbon dioxide either to where it's going to be used in another industrial process or some other type of use, or where it's going to be injected and stored underground. And so carbon capture and storage is being used, as a measurable way to reduce emissions, to capture carbon dioxide as a strategy to mitigate climate change. It's also being used as a strategy for high emitting or carbon intensive industries to directly change, the impact of their manufacturing processes to be low carbon. Here's another idea of how carbon capture and storage might look across the landscape. You can see these different technologies: direct air capture, taking carbon dioxide out of ambient air, as well as, carbon dioxide capture that might happen at a steel manufacturing, cement manufacturing facility, chemical, biofuels, any of these types of emitters where they may do carbon dioxide capture. And then you can imagine these pipelines being established to bring that carbon dioxide to a concentration point where it can be injected or transported to a place where it will be used for enhanced oil extraction or other applications. And there have been studies done in the US to identify the storage locations where injection of carbon dioxide could occur, where the geologic formations are appropriate, those kinds of things. Those types of details are all in that report that I referenced. So Dovetail's report on this topic came out in May of 2022. And so at that time, we tracked kind of what is the level of investment in these types of facilities for carbon capture and storage, these kinds of things, and revisited that information again in preparation for this webinar. So when Dovetail looked at the carbon capture and storage facilities as reported in 2022, at that time, the total number globally, these are global numbers, the total number of CCS facilities that were operating globally was 30. As of the most recent data, as you see on this slide, and this data was released in October of 2024 from the Global CCS Institute. In 2022, we were at 30 operational facilities, with the most recent data that has now risen to 50. That's that dark blue bar in the second bar on the left side of the screen. So we've gone from 30 to 50 operational. We've gone from 11 under construction to 44 under construction. And when you add up that whole column, we've gone from just under 200 that were in total back in 2022 up to 628, as you see. So in 2022, the total column was 196. In 2023, you can see that went up to 392. And the latest data is over 600. In terms of the capacity to capture carbon that's represented across those facilities, when we looked at this in 2022, the total capacity was right around 43 gigatons per year. That's now risen to 51. That is, in the operational capacity to capture carbon is at 51 gigatons per year. The amount of capacity in the facilities that are under construction is about the same, again, about 51 gigatons, up from less than 10 gigatons in the under construction category back in 2022. The total capacity for carbon capture back in 2022 was under 250 gigatons. It's now over 400 gigatons, 416. So we certainly have seen trends around increased investment, both operational facilities under construction and proposed. We do see this trend. To date, in the US has been a global leader in terms of the number of projects. There's quite a few in the US. In 2022, when we looked at this, the US had 34 projects, and Canada was next with about 19, and then it went down from there. But the US has been quite significant in this area of investment and development. A lot of that has been supported by the Department of Energy. In the Q&A, we'll talk a little bit about the most recent developments around that, where we see some of the investment from both the government and the private sector going in the coming year. So I've touched on a few of these things. Harry is going to talk about the two items in red, the BECCS and biochar. And then also Harry's going to go into more detail around natural climate solutions. So I don't want to talk about those too much, but I want to talk about the other aspects of this chart. And this chart and a lot of the background information behind it, again, is in the report that I referenced. So this chart summarizes the methodologies, really the factors that are operating in favor of the expansion of those technologies, and then the barriers, the things that create resistance in the marketplace to those types of CDR methodologies being enhanced. And the last column is the potential scale, benefit, impact, the amount of carbon dioxide that each technology might be able to capture on an annual basis, either currently or projected into the future. So with direct air capture or direct air capture with carbon storage, these are existing technologies. The origin story behind direct air capture is development during the space program in the 1960s to make it possible for astronauts to breathe in space. That's the origin story. So it is a technology that's been around for a long time, investment from the US government for a long time, NASA. So it's an existing, a proven technology. It is attracting investment in part because it's quite innovative, and it creates a lot of excitement around what the potential is. In terms of the barriers, there is opposition, like we talked about, to the infrastructure that's necessary to operationalize this. It also is quite costly. The cost has been coming down, but it is quite costly to capture, to do direct air capture. When we jump down to that fourth line, carbon capture, utilization, and storage, again, these are known technologies. They're existing. One of the big things that currently operates in favor of the expansion here is the existing market for using that captured carbon dioxide for enhanced oil recovery. Injecting carbon dioxide into oil wells can increase the production by 30 to 60%, quite substantial. And also there are some projections that the continued use of enhanced oil recovery can extend US energy independence for another decade. So these are certainly benefits that speak to the need around using that technology and the market, the economics of being able to use that technology. Also, like I said, research has identified geologic formations where carbon dioxide can be injected. And so there is existing science and knowledge around being able to do CCUS domestically in the US. Again, the pipeline infrastructure, what that means for communities, the risks associated with those pipelines, those are challenges to the adoption of this technology. Enhanced rock weathering. We haven't talked about that yet. I wanted to include this because I think for anybody watching the emerging space here with carbon dioxide removal, it is definitely one to watch. The major reasons to watch it, it is low tech. It is, and it also uses a waste product from mining. So you're just talking about rocks that chemically react with carbon dioxide, with the atmosphere, and sequester carbon dioxide. It doesn't take sophisticated or expensive equipment. It's an existing technology that's available and a way of creating benefit from a waste product. There are dust concerns, human health concerns, all kinds of things that have to be mitigated with enhanced rock weathering, but it is certainly one to keep an eye on because of the low hurdle to be able to implement it in some ways. Ocean storage is similar in some ways, that it's low tech, it's scalable, it uses some known chemical reactions, enhances some of the carbon capturing technology, carbon capturing ability of the ocean, but there are environmental risks associated with that does create some challenges as well. In that last column, again, you can see the scale of benefit associated with each of these. As we talked about, the natural climate solutions are the most significant. They're also currently operational. The other ones that are coming online by mid-century or end of the century, yet to be seen if they're able to reach some of those targets. I mentioned in the last slide, we're looking at about 628 CCS projects that are in some stage of development at this point. It's estimated that we would need about 2,000 projects by mid-century to reach our targets for what CCS should be contributing. So we're just over 600, need to get to 2,000 by mid-century if we're going to stay on track. Again, just for scale and proportion. This is my last slide, and then I'm going to turn it over to Harry. But just to summarize a little bit in terms of the pros and cons. I mean, many of these technologies have been proven, but they are evolving. And so just understanding where we're at. Obviously, on the positive side, each of these technologies reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which can mitigate climate change. In some instances, can also speak directly to pollution risks and other types of impacts where you just want to reduce emissions. Many of these technologies are well proven. They work. We know, I mean, we know what the potential is. There is economic growth and development associated with these investments. On the negative side, or the risk side of it, some of these technologies are very inefficient and the cost is very high. I mean, some of the direct air capture, you're talking about hundreds of dollars per captured ton, whereas with some of the natural climate solutions, you're talking about $10 per ton. So the operational costs are quite different between these technologies, and some of them are quite high. There's also concerns around the long-term impacts. Injecting carbon dioxide underground, how is that going to be monitored? How is that going to play out over time? And challenges with scalability. Even though many of these technologies are well proven, they haven't been implemented at a grand scale, or the scale that is necessary to reach the targets that are being proposed. So with that, thank you for your time and attention. I'll be back during the Q&A portion. And Harry, over to you.
Thanks, Katie. And welcome everybody. I'm looking forward to going into a little more detail on the natural, what I'm calling natural carbon sequestration for climate mitigation. So going back to the slide that Katie showed a minute ago, and focusing in on the CDR methods that she did not go over. The BECCS, or biochar energy with carbon capture and storage, the pikes, which is actually biochar, it's pyrogenic carbon capture and storage. And then I want to go into some more depth on the natural climate solutions also. With this slide, I want to highlight the urgency of the problem. We need to be implementing solutions, even if they're not perfected yet, while we work on introducing newer and improved solutions. As you can see from this quote, the need is massive, and we've really got to step up our game if we're going to meet the objectives we've laid out. Delving into, I'm going to call, these are all nature-based carbon technologies, even though that's not how they appeared on the graph we showed. And I'm saying that because they're all forest-based for the most part. The forests, I'll go into some more detail on that in a minute. But BECCS, it largely depends on feedstocks from forests. Durable wood products have a significant capability for carbon capture and long-term storage, as do biochars. And biochars can be made from the forests, from a BECCS facility, from durable wood products, recycling, reusing, or as a freestanding option. And I'm really going to kind of focus on the biochars because I think they're the common thread. Taking them one at a time now, forests currently provide our largest natural carbon sink. Managed forests can offer a lot of additional carbon storage, and managed there is the key word. Afforestation, which is planting new forests, offers long-term carbon storage, but it's longer term. One item I really want to highlight is the impact that deforestation is having. 10 million hectares lost annually. That's having a significant effect on our natural forest's ability to store carbon. On the looking at the BECCS technology, unfortunately in the US, woody biomass consumption for industrial heat and power has been declining over the last decade. And that is going to continue unless there's a concerted effort to turn that around. Most of our woody biomass is exported to the UK in the forms of wood pellets. And the primary user of that is the Drax power plant which is also currently the largest carbon capture and storage facility globally. When we look at the potential, there was a study done by the Department of Energy in 2023 that said the U.S. is capable of a sustainable production of 1 billion tons of biomass per year. So that's a significant opportunity to use those feedstocks for BECCS, for biochar, the durable wood products, which I wanted to, excuse me, raise as something that's not frequently talked about. In the U.S., we're producing millions of metric tons of product, of durable wood products that are going into some end use where they're going to be around for 20, 50, 100 years, potentially even longer. And when you consider the carbon storage capability of those, that's a significant contribution to to CDR. As you see there, I calculated, looking at just a year's production between softwood and hardwood lumber that's going into durable wood products. We're looking at 170 million, I left out the million, metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Now look at biochars. Biochar as a term is a lot like soil as a term. It's a word that's used to describe what's actually a very complex, non-homogeneous substance. Biochars are pyrolyzed organic matter, and they're made from a variety of feedstocks. And I've listed some examples down there in the last bullet point. What makes them so important is that the pyrolysis process, which is heating them in a low to no oxygen environment, leaves you, it cooks off all the volatiles. So you're left with nothing but a carbon shell. And that's kind of where the term came from with biological charcoal. It's a charcoal that's used, historically, it's been used in soils, in agricultural end uses, as opposed to charcoal that's used for fuel. One of the most significant characteristics of biochars and kind of their superpower is the massive surface area that they provide. And that's also where most of their co-benefits come from. What you see here in these photomicrographs is the carbon structure left behind after the pyrolysis process. You can compare these post-processing pictures with one of the original feedstock, and they look almost identical structurally. However, the biochar has a lot more open area than the original feedstock, since everything but the carbon matrix has been cooked off. These nooks and crannies, these holes, these micropores provide homes for, in the soil, they provide homes for the soil biota. And what happens is the water fills these pores and it carries nutrients in there, and then you have life, fungal life, all kinds of soil biota that are growing in this. And the carbon itself is a stable carbon, so it'll be around for centuries to millennia. And as an example, hardwood biochars I've made have a surface area that I've had tested of 188 square meters per gram. So for instance, 250 grams, or about half a pound, would have the surface area of a professional football field. I want to discuss the potential biochar has now. Biochars really offer a safe, scalable, shovel-ready technology for using low-value forest waste as well as a host of other organic residues. And it produces a very stable carbon product that will remain remain in that stable carbon form for centuries to millennia. The biochar can be used in a variety of end products, and I'll detail some of those here in a second. Historically, biochars have been incorporated in soils, and there's a lot of co-benefits that come with that incorporation, which I'll touch on again in a minute. And a point I like to make is while the biochar production process is not perfect, it does release CO2. Depending on the technology that's used, some of that can be returned with the carbon capture and storage. Some of it is released to the atmosphere in some of the different technologies. But if that biomass is left to decompose naturally, it's going to almost completely convert to CO2. So we're sequestering at least 50% of the original feedstock's biomass or carbon content. This graphic is from a fact sheet, which can be found in our library, and the fact sheet provide insight to the benefits of biochars beside its carbon sequestration capability. And this is only one of a series of fact sheets accessible both at the Dovetail website and the USBI, US Biochar Initiative website. And I'll provide those links. As I mentioned earlier, there's a number of co-benefits of using biochar in soils. One of the biggest historically and in research currently is that it increases water retention. And that's been shown to significantly increase drought resistance and resilience in the variation of soil moisture. And what happens is that the pores that you saw earlier in that photomicrograph fill with the moisture, and that moisture also contains the nutrients that have been dissolved in that water, which helps with the nutrient release leveling. And as the conditions in the soil dry and get wetter, the biochar acts as a leveler, as a kind of, from an electrical analogy, it's a capacitor. It increases the soil carbon. I mean, clearly you see that with the stable carbon component. There's a slight in the single digit labile carbon component that encourages the soil chemistry. And then the soil structure management is important when you match the right biochar with the right soils. In heavy soils, it can increase friability. In coarser soils, it can increase the water retention ability and make them more productive. Another characteristic of biochars is that they can bind contaminants, so it can mitigate the soil contamination. And actually, it's used in stormwater runoff applications a fair amount now to capture the pollutants in the runoff. There's a number of non-ag uses for biochars also. It's being used as an additive in asphalt to replace some of the petrochemical component. It's being used as an additive in concrete, primarily for sequestration, but some research has shown that it can actually increase some of the physical characteristics of the concrete. It's being used in oil and gas wells as a filler and an absorbent. The absorbent is more for surface purposes. The filler is more to cap the wells and to use them as a carbon capture and storage opportunity. I mentioned the stormwater management and wastewater treatment. There's been a lot of research and pilot operations around using biochars to capture and bind pollutants, especially heavy metals. Some of the lesser or more in development opportunities. Biochars are being used as fillers and extenders in drywall, plastics, and even in electronic components. Biochars have been around as a CDR product for quite a while, actually. It was originally, or it was named in the original IPCC report that in 2018 that laid out the 1.5 degree C climate warming target. And it's been mentioned in all the subsequent reports that have come out. As I mentioned earlier, it's been positioned as safe, scalable, and shovel-ready solution to CDR issues. The research into biochars has been just expanding amazingly over the years. Last year, there were 6,000 peer-reviewed papers. There are so many coming out, it's really hard to keep up. Fortunately, there's a discussion list hosted by the USBI and the IBI to kind of keep track of those and help those of us that are interested see what's going on. The worldwide production capacity of biochar is increasing steadily, but it's still not significant, probably less than 100,000, maybe. I think the US is about 100,000 tons per year, and those are dry tons, but it's growing, but we need more. Biochars have been the market leader in the carbon credit market, 87% in 2022, with a price between $100 and $500 a ton, which is pretty significant, and that helps offset some of the costs for usage. I want to take a quick look at the production technologies, which spans the range from sophisticated to fairly modest. This is a stationary unit which produces heat for downstream processes, as well as the biochar, and it uses rotating drums that are heated, and it produces syngas as part of the pyrolysis process, which can be recycled to heat the process itself or used in downstream energy production. This is a mid-range skid-mounted system, and the syngas here is flared off, but it's capable of producing a couple of tons an hour. It uses chips as the feedstock, and in this case, wood chips. These are, it's loosely called the flame cap technology, and it's the primary means for smaller scale production of biochars on site where the feedstock is. As you can see, it's a human scale process, but there's been considerable innovation in this field, and there are now a number of units available for purchase. Here's some resources I wanted to share that I mentioned earlier. The IBI International Biochar Initiative, the website there, then the US Biochar Initiative. They have discussion groups, newsletter, conferences. Actually, I should throw out that there'll be a conference in the 2025 conference in Minneapolis in September, the week of the 15th. There's cost assistance from a number of USDA organizations. Again, as Katie said, we have a library with a lot of information. One of my favorite private biochar advocates is Kelpie Wilson there with Wilson Biochar Associates. There's a ton of information, especially for the smaller scale, do-it-yourself. There are plans, and there are kilns available for sale. The Ithaca Institute produces a lot of research papers and white papers on biochar that are very valuable. Biochar's potential to use forests, forest residues, forest products is significant, especially when you think about increasing the soil carbon and the co-benefits that I talked about. It can be a byproduct or an end product of a BECCS operation, and same with the pikes. it is the end product there. To do a summary, the uses for biochars abound and markets are developing fast. There's a lot of research going on to underwrite the development. The biochars do have a lot of co-benefits as a product in its own right and as a climate mitigant. As I've said before, one of my favorites is that biochar technology is safe, scalable, and shovel ready. It just needs to be applied. The 2030 target that we talked about from the IPCC report of 1.5 degree global warming is only 5 years away. And in some cases, it's reported that we've already hit that or are very close to it now. At this point, I want to shout out to the folks who've made the growth of biochars as a climate mitigation solution successful. The Forest Service, USDA, and the Department of Energy in the US have made major contributions to moving biochar from an idea and in early stages, a hobby interest to an industry and a widely accepted product. And it has a host of applications and uses. Their support's been invaluable in positioning this industry and this product as a valuable solution for a host of issues. USBI and IBI have been the on-the-ground advocates for the understanding of biochars as a product and as a CDR technology, as have the other national organization under IBI's umbrella.
Thank you, Harry. And thank you again to you all for joining us today. Like we said before, you can access our reports on the Dovetail website. And if you're interested in registering for our upcoming webinars, you can just scan the QR code that's on the screen. At this point, we are going to move into the Q&A portion of our webinar.
Excellent. Thank you, Maria, Harry. All right, what's the first question, Maria? Oh, before we start questions, I have to apologize. Let's see how awake everybody was this morning. I made a major error in my presentation with the units, and we'll get it corrected before we send out the recording. But at the end of my presentation where I talked about the current capacity of capture technologies, I use the unit gigatons. The chart is in megatons. There's 1,000 unit difference, multiple order of magnitude. So when you look at that chart, the total carbon capture capacity amongst all of those projects in the pipeline is like 416 megatons, which is 0.4 gigatons. So less than half a gigaton in the currently proposed capture technologies. We'll get that correction noted in the recording for the presentation. I hope you all passed the test. That you were like, what is she talking about? But we'll get that corrected. What's our first question, Maria?
Thank you, Katie. All right, our first question is, what are the latest insights or updates on the U.S. policy position, agency activities, and public funding of CDR technologies?
Good. Well, I'll take a shot at that, and then Harry, I'll pass it to you as well. So there's kind of two parts of the policy question that have been emphasized and been very influential in the market. One part of it is the permitting, and then the other part of it is the tax credits around carbon capture. So on the permitting side, a lot of the conversation has been around the delays within the EPA in allowing the states to have jurisdiction over projects within the states. And so it's taken years most of the time for EPA to give that authority to the states, to grant that authority. It's been a laborious process. So to date, there have only been 4 states that have been approved to permit projects in their states. So the 4 approved states are Wyoming, North Dakota, Louisiana, and West Virginia. And so once a state becomes approved, it's reasonable to expect that the rate at which these projects are going to be developed will accelerate, because it'll become a state level permitting process rather than a federal process. So those 4 states have been approved for their permitting, and there are 8 states that have pending approvals: Nebraska, Colorado, Utah, Oklahoma, Illinois, California, Arizona, and Texas. So it's reasonable to expect the approved states are going to have an accelerated rate of project development. The 8 pending states are the states that are looking at these opportunities, are in the most likely locations to see these projects develop. And there is some speculation that the permitting and approval process for those pending states will move forward more quickly in the current administration. That's one part of the policy environment, is the permitting process, EPA, the relationship with the states, and the 12 states where we see a strong interest around this. So that's what I would say is, if you're interested in those states, stay tuned and watch that EPA and state level process and how that move forward. The other part of it is the tax credits. The tax credits around carbon capture have been significant in incentivizing investment. I mean, the tax credits to date, let me get the right program here. The section 45Q of the IRS Revenue Code of 1986, these tax credits have been providing about $180 per ton for carbon dioxide removal methods, about $85 a ton for direct air capture and carbon storage. So these are significant financial incentives for these projects to develop. It's unclear if those tax credits are going to be continued. Stay tuned, place your bets, stay tuned, whatever. But clearly, if those tax credits aren't continued, then the economic viability of these projects is dramatically changed. So watch the permitting, watch the tax credits. Those two things will determine our future. Harry, what do you think? Did I get that about right? What do you see in the cards?
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion on the biochar list about 45Q. So there's a lot of concern, especially from those who are looking at larger scale operations. Of course, I'm talking just the biochar world, but I'm sure it'll affect others. USDA has been the primary funder for increasing soil carbon, which is a big CDR focus. I'm more familiar with the rural development and ag programs, so I'll kind of speak to them. Because they're the ones that have been historically available, but as you brought up, they're now kind of all in limbo. There were a host of grants and cost share operations or arrangements available for research, for on-farm applications, and for economic development of CDR technologies. Excuse me. As a farmer myself and as a biochar advocate, I'm familiar with opportunities from rural development and NRCS mostly. The climate smart projects that were awarded supported a lot of research, which had direct application to farms and farmers. And then on the NRCS side, the fairly recent availability of the NRCS 336 practice, especially in concert with other practices, which created a suite of soil carbon enhancement efforts. And biochar has really played a major role in all those. There's a lot of research now funded, well, hopefully still funded, ongoing nationwide. As I mentioned, how many papers are being produced per year. And the same holds true for NRCS. There's a lot of projects in the pipeline, cost share projects, doing the 336 practice, which incorporates biochar combined with manures or composts into the soil. So yeah, that's much more focused than what you talked about, Katie, but that's kind of what I'm familiar with.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Harry and Katie. Harry, this is actually a question for you. Can you share a bit more about your personal experience with making and using biochar and the current project in Minnesota?
Oh, okay. Well, I've been making biochar here on our farm in Virginia for about 10 years. Initially, I had a pyrolysis retort, which is a closed unit that's heated from the outside. Um, and I was making the biochar from a variety of sawmill and harvest feedstocks. Um, and so some of that we used here on the farm. Some of it went into research projects, which I was involved with, with scientists at Virginia Tech and University of Minnesota. And after I filled the research project needs, um, what I've been making is primarily for use here on the farm, and we incorporate it with compost, which we make from bedding and other materials from our livestock. And that's actually something that I should probably point out. Biochar in the soil is not recommended to go in without being inoculated before it goes in. As I talked about in the presentation, um, the the biochar gets filled, and if it goes into the soil raw, it'll suck up all the moisture and the nutrients, and could possibly suppress growth. So inoculating it, ideally with charcoal, or I mean compost, or mixing it with manures is the way to go. I sold the pyrolysis retort because it just took too much time to make a batch of biochar, and it was a batch process. And I switched to I made a flame cap kiln, one of the Oregon kilns, the plans for which are available on Wilson Biochar website, as a matter of fact. And that allowed me to produce about the same amount of biochar in a few hours, where before it would take a 24-hour cycle to make that much. And these kilns are a lot easier to load and unload. And I've had all my biochars tested at the same lab. So the characteristics have been quite similar no matter what technology I've been using. And actually, I'm working on a report right now to compare those chars with chars from some other folks that have made their own with the low tech, and compare them with some commercially produced chars. And that report will be announced in the Dovetail newsletter when it comes out, so keep an eye out for it. For the project in northern Minnesota that you asked about, there are 3 partners working on that. The Carlton County Soil Water Conservation District's manager, who's now retired, Minnesota Power, and then Dovetail are the partners on that project. And we organized to apply biochar mixed with on-farm manure or compost in a number of ratios on 4 different farms with different soil types and management practices and crops. And it's a 3-year project. We're tracking we're doing soil tests every year, and looking at the crops to see what we're learning. And this is all the common thread on this is that they're all applying this NRCS 336 practice. And the 336 practice is to build soil carbon. So right now we're in the 2nd year of soil and crop data collection. We're putting together some information which should be published again. Watch the Dovetail website, and we'll announce it there. I'm expecting to have some of the initial lessons learned, not the analysis of the soil tests and everything, probably in the next month or so. I'll leave it there. If anybody has any questions, my information will be at the end and I can give you more information. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Harry, and looking forward to the upcoming projects and reports that you have coming. All right, let's get back to our next question. Now, how deep or wide are the underground storage containers? Do you have examples of where this is occurring? Any risk of leaks, etc.?
Excellent, thank you. And thank you for the question, Mac. So within our report, we did share there's an atlas of the US regions for doing some of this underground storage. And so really we're talking about carbon dioxide being injected underground, so into geologic formations like you would have associated with oil wells and those kinds of things. That's the most common thing. So it's injection into underground geologic formations. And the Great Plains Institute has done some mapping of where these areas exist around the country. And they do correspond to those states that I mentioned, where they're really looking at the permitting process. So, but that information's in our report. It's at the Great Plains Institute website, a map of the geologic formations that are amenable to this type of use. And certainly there is controversy around, the potential for leaks in the future, really all of those kinds of things. We've seen a lot of that controversy around to date. A lot of that controversy has been around the pipelines that would actually move, across the landscape, because that's certainly where much of the concern has been. But the long-term storage, there's also concerns there about leaks or really what might happen many decades into the future. So
Thank you for that. Our next question says, I believe that virtually all of the loss of forest deforestation is occurring in the tropics. Is this correct?
Yeah, you want to go ahead with that, Harry? You'd mentioned the deforestation impacts. Go ahead.
It's not all in the tropics. I think the tropics are the dominant deforestation candidates, but we're seeing it especially in development and in the shift to agriculture. And Katie, I think you've got some more detailed information on that, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, globally, different countries, the net deforestation may be higher in some parts of the world. But even here domestically, for the last 100 years, we've had stable to increasing forest areas across the country at net, as a total aggregate. But there are projections between now and mid-century for some of that to tip. I mean, we are seeing greater development, urban expansion, these kinds of things. So deforestation is a risk in many places. It is a current trend in primarily in tropical regions, but I think it's something we have to recognize can occur anywhere where there's competing land use, whether it's for ag or development or other things like that. So currently, North America, US and Canada has stable to increasing forest areas, but that's not a guarantee. That will depend on our markets, our policies, and how we prioritize our land use for coming generations, whether we continue to have as much forest land as we have.
Thank you. I'm wondering if either of you can speak to wood vaulting as a CCS strategy and how carbon markets are viewing this technology.
I'll give this a shot, Harry. You tell me if you want to chime in. Wood vaults. I'll be honest with all of you. I'll be as blunt as possible. When I first heard about wood vaults, I rolled my eyes and said, you got to be kidding me. This is the silliest thing I've ever heard. So after that reaction, I said, okay, take a deep breath, give it a real look before you completely dismiss it. So I'm just being honest. That was my initial reaction. And I hope you will channel my thought, because that's, I think that's something for the forest sector and for anybody who cares about these innovations and these emerging technologies is don't be like the initial Katie. Before you judge some of these things, really read about them and understand what's going on here, because there's more to it. And so with wood vaults, I was very dismissive in the beginning because my initial impression was this was just taking woody materials and burying it underground. Guess what? It's way more sophisticated than that. So what opened my eyes to really what it's about and what the potential is the design of the wood vaults is, yes, to take material and store it underground, but to store it in a way that it could be utilized in the future. And to me, and the key thing with wood vaults is we recognize that there are parts of the landscape in the US and around the world where the markets to utilize wood are not strong enough. But we need to do something to address forest health, wildfire risk, all of these things. So there is a need to remove wood in the landscape, but the markets aren't going to pay for it. So if you can remove wood in the landscape, store it in a way that in the future can still be utilized, to me, you are creating some win-win-wins there. And so I think it's something the forest sector should take seriously, think about innovatively, but yeah, don't be like me and just write it off just because it sounds silly to begin with. There's more to it. Harry, any thoughts on it?
No,
you
I'll leave it with
don't have
you.
a wood vault on your farm yet? You're gonna get no wood vault.
No, I
Okay.
do it all into biochar or
Yes,
lumber.
because to me that is still the problem with wood vaults is our shared objective should be to create economically viable markets. You know what I mean? So wood vaults should be like a last, last resort. But I think we do recognize there's lots of places where we probably have to consider the last resort for kind of caring for our forests and reducing some of the forest health and wildfire and public safety risks. So yeah, stay tuned. And I know there have been some wood vaults installed. It's beyond the piloting stage. It's being rolled out. So I think it is something for us to, at least if you're going to judge it, do it based upon having done your homework. So, anyway, what do we got next, Maria?
All right. In the absence of climate change mitigation being a top priority, are the other benefits of CDR technology sufficient to warrant their continued development?
This is $1 million question, I think. Yeah. Maybe. How's that for an answer? Maybe some of them. I think it's clear that some of these technologies will not exist without, urgency around climate change, significant enabling policy, even subsidy or incentives. But others, bluntly, the use of captured carbon dioxide for enhanced oil recovery is arguably a pretty viable market. That's where the majority of this captured carbon is going. It enhances the well productivity 30 to 60%. There's some projections that if we continue to use that enhanced oil recovery, we extend U.S. energy independence by a decade. I mean, these are big round generalizations, but I think that's one where it's different in terms of the existing market and some of the proven benefits of it. But I don't know, Harry, what do you think? Flip of the coin, anybody's guess?
I think you're right on in general. I think biochar may shine a little bit more brightly there because of the success of the voluntary carbon credit market that's underwriting some of the costs and allowing a bit more interest in investing in that productive technology. But generally, I think, yeah, it's a crapshoot right now.
Yeah, a lot of uncertainty.
Uncertain.
Right.
That's a nicer way to say it.
Yeah.
It's all the same. Maria, what you got?
What is the policy environment at the state level for CCS?
Yeah. Like I mentioned, I mean, there's at least 12 states that are really looking for a green light to enable these projects within their state. And so the short answer is it varies by state. And so there are states that are part of that atlas that have opportunities for the underground storage. There are states that have existing oil and gas industries that want to be able to use these technologies. So it varies by state, but certainly there's a good dozen states that are very interested in enabling this. There are states that are already doing projects and that have established the policy kind of guide rails around this. So there's a couple of resources. I want to see, what was it? It was RMI put together a state CDR atlas. So if you look that up as well, that gives a map of the existing state level policies and the details for particular states. So there's a couple of things from Great Plains Institute and RMI that provide access to that state level information.
Perfect, thank you. Harry, it looks like this one's for you. Can biochar be used to reduce methane emissions in wetlands?
Short answer is yes. However, technically it's challenging. Dealing with wetlands is just a challenge in general. But I guess the important answer to the question is that research has shown that biochar does absorb methane. So it's technically possible. How to figure out the actual application details will be a challenge. But it sounds like a great grant opportunity if you can find funding to try it out.
Perfect, thank you. And our final question is, what recommendations do you have for the forest and wood product sector when it comes to CDR?
Yeah, I'd be interested if you might have more specifics for me, Harry, but I think it goes back to part of what I was saying about myself earlier is I think the sector will be well served if we lean into understanding these opportunities and don't just either see them as threats or ignore them. I think just if the fundamental thing for the forest sector and the wood product sectors to understand is wood is carbon storage, forests are carbon capture, and we embrace that as a core shared understanding, I think that will enable us to see opportunities within this. But just like many things, if we really want these innovations to be beneficial to the sector, we're probably going to have to find a way to get in front of it and being involved with the design for that outcome, rather than just hoping we're somehow going to be recognized. And because this is competitive, this is very competitive. And one of the things we're seeing right now is the highly engineered solutions have a lot of proponents. They're attracting a lot of investment because there's a lot of interest in these high-tech solutions. These really, wow, science fiction, it's really attracting attention. So in this moment, we have to find ways to have the conversation says, that's really cool. Science fiction stuff coming into real, wow, that is amazing. At the same time, there are these traditional ways of caring for the land that are a natural complement. You bring these wonderful technology, science breakthroughs together with the lived experience we have. Boom, now we have a whole solution. But we're going to have to find a way to have those conversations because to some degree right now, we're not going toe to toe in terms of being in the room and being able to advocate for all of the benefits that wood and forest can provide. But we have a great story to tell. We just have to make sure we're out there at the front lines with our story. So that's my answer, Harry. But what do you think?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is reducing forest wildfires. I mean, that's a huge contribution to global CO2. And that goes back to the managed forest comment I made earlier. That's we've got to do that. But then for the forest products industry, CDR is happening throughout the sector, whether it gets recognized or recorded or not. Every 2x4, every chair, every table, every chest of drawers, every mass timber building or timber frame, they're all sequestering carbon. And it's not unusual for any of those products to last for centuries if they're well made and maintained. I think the wood products sector would benefit from capturing that data and promoting it as a public service. And there's basically no additional cost to do that. It's a marketing message. And it fits in with the larger message we've been trumpeting for decades about the benefits of forests and wood products as renewable resources. So I think, to me, that's kind of low-hanging fruit.
You're absolutely right.
Thank you both so much. And thank you to everyone who sent in questions. At this time, before we end this session, you all suggested topics for our Q4 webinar. Here is a word cloud of all of those topics that were sent in. We analyzed the results and pulled the top 10 responses for everyone on the call to vote for. So if you don't mind, just take a couple of minutes and vote on your top 3 choices in the poll. We will announce the Q4 topic in Q3, so look out for that. Thank you so much if you took the time to vote. I'm very excited to see how we are able to whittle down these topics. They're all very great ones. At this time, thank you all so much for joining us today. We'd love to see you at our upcoming webinars later this year. You can register using the link we've shared in the chat previously. We'll follow up with an email that contains the recording to the session, a registration link for the other webinars this year, and a feedback survey for this webinar. You can reply to that email that we're going to send if you have questions or other feedback, or easily reach us at info@dovetailinc.org. You know, as a nonprofit, we strive to keep these webinars accessible to everyone by not requiring a registration fee. So if you find value in our work and are in a position to support us, we invite you to consider making a donation to Dovetail. Every contribution, big or small, helps us continue offering these resources like our reports and our webinars. You can find the donation link in the chat or at the Dovetail website. Once again, thank you so much for being here, and we hope to see you at the next session on June 6th.
Thank you, Maria, Harry, Amy.
Thank you all.